I think in the first session we have covered very well a second objective called critically examine global developments that have a bearing on these sectors, especially the recent negotiations at the international organizations such as the WTO, UNFCCC, but the first objective, on the basis of which we also need to act in the social movements, through social movements and mass movements and class movements, is the objective called assess the adequacy and effectiveness of government policies linked to agriculture, food, land, forestry, digitalization, and climate in responding to the needs of small-scale food producers, workers, Adivasi, and forest dwellers. It is still remaining. It's expected to be covered in the probably post-lunch session. While one will discuss some of the specific national policies during the post-lunch session, let me flag an important issue, which I think has been thrown to us, which is on the nature of the state. See, there are known unknowns. We know that the kind of state we need should be democratic. There's a talk of inclusive state, a state which cares. But that's not the state in the last 30 years which has evolved. This is a state which has followed the philosophy of liberalization, privatization, globalization, and commodifying even areas which were till now not sold and bought as commodities. And large monopolies have come up, which was not the case till the mid-80s. We had no such private monopolies at that particular point of time. We had public sector, the state enterprises, where there was a possibility of democratic control. And there was a possibility of inclusion. But over the period, if you see in the last 3 decades, starting from more 90s, 91 onwards, there's been a counter-passive revolution, which has reversed the agenda of the India's freedom movement. The politics that the social movement, the class movements, Adivasis movement were all involved with, the gains that they had made have been very passively eroding. And a situation has come up where we feel saying, let us now find out how to regulate these monopolies. And their power is so much, whether it's big tech, it's big business, big data, whether they're producing good data or not, whether they're producing good tech or not, it is immaterial. But since they're big, they influence our lives. James just now gave the example of Santosh Kumari, that big tech, digitalization, is not a good tech. It has affected us. Suicides happening. The divide remains. So how does one respond? How should social movements articulate their agendas? I think is a known unknown, which needs to be discussed. There are so many dilemmas in the minds of people. Contradictions which we need to handle. Take example, today the states have been emaciated. Whether GST, whether it is fiscal resources, crunch that we feel. States have to scound for funds. Their borrowings are now also, which were off the budget, are also now under regulation. Take the case of Kerala, for example, which is one of the progressive states. Today faces that particular challenge. Can't borrow even. So many restrictions. Now, very rightly, these are agendas of the government policy, but largely, if I include them in the agenda, that the kind of helplessness that the state governments, which are the first knock for us when the union government has been pursuing the liberalization, privatization, globalization agenda. What do we demand from them? What do we ask from them? It's a vast subject. And in many ways, I find that those dilemmas need to be made upfront. They should be made the frontier. I'm going to mention to you something because in the last 40 years, our education systems, our whole developmental imagination has been hooked onto that change which has happened. Our science, technology, R&D, research and development, budgets are very small. Our workforce involved in that is very small. But that was the main push that the independent state, the post-independent state, through the National Planning Committee, the Planning Commission, used to push. Science and technology-based investments would come in. Today, our 40% of S&T personnel working on R&D. S&T personnel work in all kinds of places. Bank also they work with. Health, but I'm talking of research and development, where your new knowledge is to be created, new innovations are to be put across. 40% of this total lack of workers are 5.5 lakh workers. CSR has just 5,000 scientists, ICR has some 6,000 scientists, they're in thousands, they're not in lakhs. But each of the companies sitting in Bangalore, Hyderabad and in Noida and Gurugram has many more people working here round the clock for the US companies. Their total number, if I put together, from the US companies is 2.25 lakh, just US companies. If you put Syngenta, which is the European company, it's taken over ChemChina, or ChemChina has taken over Syngenta, we do not know yet. Things are still fluid, they will evolve. But just if you take the US companies, these are our best minds. They are today working round the clock for US companies, not for the societal challenges that you and me face here. They are all AI workers. They are all in ICT. They are the digital experts. There's an extraction going on from the very human resource. We're talking about extractionism from minerals, soils, land. Here is a very human resource which has been globally integrated in such a manner that he is not brain drain, it's an internal brain drain. Most of the educational institutions which we have created from the 80s onwards are dedicated and devoted to creating these IT engineers, IT diploma holders. Many of them, NASSCOM says that it is 18% of them are only employable. NASSCOM is the association of all the information communication technology. This dilemma that what kind of economy do we want? Everybody, including I would say the most of the progressive people, are in a bind. What to argue for, what to advocate for. I hope our academics take note of this counter-passive revolution which has happened from the 80s onwards. And then talk of what should be our response. Cooperatives, Pushpendra rightly pointed out. Anita spoke about. Do we want cooperatives? Yes, we want. What kind of regulation we should have is not an ordinary issue. Yes, it's a simple issue that multi-state cooperatives should be organized and regulated at the national level, but the rest are all primary agriculture, PSEs, credit societies, or state production cooperatives which are at local level, all of them, what kind of regulations which have evolved over the period. Lot of neoliberal discourse also has happened. Like corporations used to ask for freedom, cooperatives also have to be put into the marketplace. There's a whole design in regulation which is occurring. We need to discuss it. How social control. All India Kisan Sabha rightly adopted a social cooperative bill, a legislation which has been circulated. And I hope All India Kisan Sabha would talk more and more about it. It's been a wonderful document put forward during the COVID period, both on MSP. There were 2 resolutions which we issued at the press conference. And MSP one, and the second one was the social corporate. We have to resolve some of these challenges. Even in Kerala, when I go, one of the most progressive states which we are left with at the moment, and I do not know what's going to happen in Tripura. The kind of agenda that we need to create with regard to economy. What is our alternate path? We've been in dilemma for very, very long. And in fact, the neoliberal imaginations began to take over in every sphere, other than the fact that the certain amount of social security provisions need to be saved, and because they were not there, to the extent they were there, they should be saved, and what can be advanced there. But is that enough? Regulation, social security, is that our vision of the new path? Let me close in, and this is a vast subject, and I think we'll take it up in the afternoon session as well as tomorrow, that what should be our alternate path to development so that there's a democratic state? And we are talking about this after 30 years of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Power of Adani. There's an Adani anthem. I don't know whether I have time to even play Adani anthem here. Adani anthem is going around, and I'll share it with all of you just now. He says, I have made this India. Sadak mere karan, health mere karan. This is the Adani anthem. And today, opportunity for capital is one thing, but there is an opportunity for also the revolutionaries. People are asking for transformative change. And I think that opportunity exists. Adani issue has opened up that particular opportunity, and I hope as social movements, as class movements, as political movements, we'll take advantage. There are several battles we are fighting. We're trying to defend public sector and public services on one hand. On the other hand, we'll have to save ourselves from IPEF, because everybody here, including I've seen in very many trade union discussions which were recently held in Constitution Club on Amazon, we said, there is in country anti-China advantage. So let us use on Amazon also the anti-China that they are importing from China. Is this the country that we want? A new imagination? That we want to be drawn into the geopolitics which the US drives? Or are we going to drive a new world? What is the new world, and what would be our place? What would be the state that we need? And I think, thank you very much. Shamli's fingers are accepted and adopted. Thank you very much.